Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to you and welcome to this Doha Debate special event sponsored by the Qatar Foundation. It's rare to see a senior Israeli politician in a Gulf state, rarer still to find one who's agreed to answer questions that he hasn't seen in advance from an Arab audience, in this case a group of students studying here in the state of Qatar and drawn from across the region. Our guest has been at the center of Israeli politics for more than half a century and has held public appointments for almost 60 years. He's been Prime Minister twice in the 80s and 90s, and last year he was appointed Deputy Prime Minister. Shimon, welcome, and thanks very much for making the trip.
Thank you.
As a seasoned politician, you know that politicians come to sell. Have you come here to Qatar to sell anything new this time?
To sell and buy. I came to say and to listen, because I do believe there is nothing better than to have a real dialogue.
But what have you brought that's new? Have you brought any new proposals? Have you brought a new willingness to sit and engage for peace?
I'm not sure, but I believe I brought some clarifications. Because when you live just on the media, you get maybe the not detailed picture. For example, I do believe that the chances for peace are by far better than it appears in the headlines. And today with the Amir, we have a good chance to go over all the details. And I told them that we are not far away from making peace.
How is it that you say you're not far away from peace when, for instance, you are expanding settlements in direct contravention of your commitments to the roadmap?
I think the government has decided to stop any building of further settlements. I think it's stopped.
It has stopped?
Pardon?
It has stopped. It announced a new one in December.
No, it has stopped. The new one in December they've announced was postponed.
Maskiot has been postponed?
Yes.
And the expansion to Male Adumim, your biggest settlement?
It's very much alive in the papers, but not in reality.
It's not going to happen?
I don't know, but...
You're going to give a commitment that that expansion is not going to happen?
No, I can't give such a commitment because it became part of Jerusalem. But in fact, nothing is moving.
Well,
you know,
I wonder if your government then is speaking with one voice, because Mr. Olmert, the Prime Minister's spokeswoman, Miri Eisin, says that the Israeli government is committed to the continuing growth, natural growth of the settlements in the perimeter around Jerusalem. You're now saying something completely different.
No, I think that's really the commitment of the government, but there is also a pragmatic side, and there is timing. And I do hope that we shall be able to make some progress before many changes will occur. It's true that this is the policy of the State of Israel.
And it's a policy which directly contravenes your commitments under the roadmap, whereby the government of Israel freezes all settlement activity, including natural growth.
We don't consider Jerusalem as part of the settlement activities. Jerusalem was taken as part of the Israeli sovereignty, part of Jerusalem, because there are many Arab suburbs which are not included in it. And I know that somebody may in the future raise the problem. But right now we are pragmatically trying to lower the flames and restrain our activities.
But you can't give me an assurance, you can't give our audience an assurance that the settlements are not going to expand further.
Well, the settlements in the West Bank, I can give you an assurance. Jerusalem is a different situation.
And there are 20 settlements that your illegal outposts that you have promised to get rid of since 2001, and you've got rid of one only under a court order. Why so slow? Why the hold-up?
Basically, because there was an intifada, because there were attacks. Look, you look at it from one point of view. The Israelis look at it differently. Israel did in the meantime...
It's how the Palestinians look at it, isn't it? The most visible symbol of occupation is the settlements.
No, sir. You forgot one thing. Israel dismantled settlements in Gaza completely.
And yet you retain control over entry, exit to Gaza, the registry of the population. You have a stranglehold over Gaza, still.
No, sir, I'm sorry. The army left completely Gaza. completely.
It's been back quite a few times, hasn't it?
Because they are firing missiles against us to stop it. We handed over Gaza completely to the Palestinian hands.
But
And
not the
furthermore,
entry or exit, not an airport, nothing.
No. It's also, I mean,
Not the supplies that come in or the electricity that the people use. You control all that.
No. The passage between us, between Gaza and Egypt, is very much controlled by the European Union and by the Egyptians themselves. And for the first time in history, Israel used force to dismantle our own settlements. So while you're talking about settlement, we have shown an example what we can and have in mind to do.
But it wasn't, you dismantled them because, as Ehud Olmert told me a couple of years ago, they were both wrong and untenable. It wasn't an act of kindness to the Palestinians, was it? They were wrong and untenable, his words.
Well, if they were wrong, means that somebody else was right. And we left completely Gaza. So when you talk about settlement, look on the other side of the story, which was never precedented. It's unprecedented.
You ignore the huge numbers of checkpoints that you keep in the West Bank, the barriers, the separation barrier which separates Palestinians from their land, and you ask why they're unhappy with the state of Israel?
80 checkpoints were dismantled too, right now. And then again, the problem is, you see, we dismantled yesterday in Eilat for the first time. Again, there arrived a suicidal bomber. Look, we have to defend ourselves too. It is not a contest of beauty. Every day we have close to 70 warnings about suicidal bombers trying to cross the line.
And yet, according to your own human rights organization, B'Tselem, Israeli forces killed 660 Palestinians last year, compared to the Palestinians who killed 17 Israeli civilians and 6 soldiers. Who is a threat to whom? Who is the bigger threat to whom, Mr.
That
Peres?
is 1 year after we built the wall. Before there were hundreds and hundreds of Israelis that were killed. So we took defensive measures.
But
and
this
also,
is disproportionate beyond belief, isn't it?
I agree, but the disproportion begins
And it
with...
doesn't worry you? It doesn't concern
It does
you?
worry me, but the disproportion begins with firing missiles against civilian life for no reason.
But Mr.
It's
Peres,
true, they don't hit precisely.
Mr. Peres, 141 children, Palestinian children, killed last year by your forces.
I regret it very much. For me, every child is a child, whether Palestinian or Israeli. But I will also...
You regret it, but that's... what do you really feel about it? Because
I feel poorly, I feel badly. I would like to do everything I can to stop it.
But you haven't over the years. You haven't managed to stop it.
Let them stop firing. No child will be killed. Israel never initiated. Israel always just reacted. The minute they will stop, there won't be a single victim. You know, we have the Paris Center for Peace. We are curing Palestinian children that were wounded. Look, we don't look upon the Palestinians as our eternal enemies, you must understand. And we wish they will live in peace, like all of us. In peace, in freedom,
and yet you will restrict the supplies to them when you feel like it in order to put pressure on the population as a whole. As one of the chief advisors to Mr. Olmert said last year, Dov Weisglass, the idea is to put the Palestinians on a diet, but not to make them die of hunger. How chilling is that?
I think this is a unfortunate expression. That's not our intention. You spoke about the passages. We rebuild them.
Do you repudiate that?
Yes.
Because the Prime Minister hasn't, has he?
No, the Prime Minister never said it either. I am sure about it.
Dov Weisglass said it.
Dov Weisglass was an advisor.
Yes.
And I think he...
and close to the seat of power in Israel.
Expressions are a matter of luck. Some of them are unlucky.
So you worry about the expression and not the reality?
No, because the reality is that we really opened all the passages, and, you know, they put bombs in the passages. You know, we try to save the greenhouses. To rebuild them, they destroy them. There is lack of reason in it. The minute, again, they will stop, no single child will be touched or hurt and surely not killed.
Mr. Peres, you're going to run for president?
To run, I'm not sure.
But you haven't ruled it out.
I think it's too early to do it. We still have a president under trial, and I don't think I have to be in a hurry to announce anything like it.
You are going to do it, aren't you? Everybody assumes you are going to do it. You've lost none of your hunger for politics and power.
If that is the case, so why do you ask me?
Well, I want to hear it from your lips, not from mine.
For me, I'm not in a mood to do it right now.
You could just share this secret with us tonight.
I won't answer you seriously. I'm busy with several projects that I really like to do. And all my life, I thought that what to do is more important than what to be. So I'm not in a hurry to give up doing for being. And I know there is an expectation in the country that I shall do it. I mean, the support is over 80%. But still, I wouldn't like to start to run for a post and giving up the job that I'm doing right now for the country.
All right, well, I think you're going to get even tougher questions from our audience. Let me now throw the floor open to them. And our first question is from Nadia Merchant. Nadia Merchant.
Hello, good evening. You have neither forgiven nor forgotten those who committed crimes against your people. How do you expect the Palestinians to forgive and forget the crimes you have committed and continue to commit against them?
I am not making any account with the past. My eyes are set for the future. I think what happened, happened. And I think we don't have to return all the time to history for the simple reason that we cannot correct history. We can correct the future. So to forgive and forget is a good advice for everybody, if you can really provide to your children and our children a better future. And that is our preference.
Would you like to come back?
Yes. So how do you expect to bring peace? I mean, it goes on and on. It's never going to stop in that sense. I mean, there has to be a stop to all this.
It's a good question, and I shall give you a real answer. You know, there were 4 wars between us and Egypt. Many Egyptians were killed, many Israelis were killed. And one day, in spite of all the victims, of all the hatred, of all the misunderstanding, we made peace. The same goes with the Jordanians. Again, we were at war, we attacked each other. There were many victims, some of them innocent, and in spite of it, we make peace. The same will happen with the Palestinians. If you have had once a war, it doesn't mean that you have to repeat it eternally in the future. You have to bring a stop, and you cannot accuse one generation for the wrongdoing of the previous generation. Because we want the whole world and each of us to become better and not to repeat the same wrongs and the same mistakes.
Question, please, from Zayed Abdul Qadir.
You personally have been involved in many wars and have fought for over 60 years. Isn't it a fact that Israel's policy of military deterrence has been a failure?
No. You know, I have to divide the history, the past, into 2 parts. The first 30 years were years of war and bellicose and craziness, if you want. Israel was attacked 5 times. Israel was outgunned, outmanned, outnumbered, if you want, and we have had to defend ourselves. The last 30 years, there was an introduction of peace, and the whole policy has changed. We went over from an emphasis on the military to an emphasis of the politics. And we have made 4 attempts to make peace. Twice we succeeded, twice we failed. We succeeded with Egypt and Jordan. We failed with the Palestinians and the Lebanese. And you ask why? The answer is obvious. Egypt and Jordan have a government, have an army, have a policy, have an address. Alas, the Palestinians and the Lebanese have many armies and no army, have many governments and no government. Their division is our tragedy, not only theirs. We would like to see the Palestinians being united under one flag, one government, one army, one policy, and then I assure you, peace will come rather promptly. The nature of the conflict today stems more from the division within the Palestinians than the differences between us and the Palestinians. And really I pray that the Palestinians will unite, and we shall do with them what we did with the Jordanians and the Egyptians, the same.
Let's take a question, if we may, please, from Awa Al-Baji. Awa Al-Baji.
Your country is said to be holding 9,000 Arab prisoners, including women and children. When Hezbollah captured 2 Israeli soldiers, you bombed Lebanon for 30 days and killed 1,200 Lebanese, most of which are civilians. What do you think you achieved from such a devastation?
Well, it's a little bit more complicated than you describe. The Lebanese penetrated the land of Israel. We don't know what for, because we left Lebanon completely in accordance with the United Nations. The Secretary General of the United Nations has praised us for doing it. And after we tried to release, to save the life of the soldiers, the Hezbollah started to bomb and send rockets that hit Haifa, which is a city far away from Lebanon. What for? Can you explain to me? Whom is Hezbollah serving? But the Iranians. We didn't touch Lebanon. We left the land. We didn't touch the water. We implemented completely the United Nations resolution. You know, most of the Lebanese don't understand what Hezbollah is doing. Why are they fighting? What for?
The question was what you think you achieved.
We didn't invite it, sir. We didn't invite the bombing of Israel.
No, but what do you think you achieved?
We achieved our defense. We forced them to stop it.
But by devastating parts of southern Lebanon?
Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, said, would he know that we should react so severely, he wouldn't do it. So we achieved a good lesson for Hezbollah. Don't do it.
What about 1 million people shoved out of their homes on the road? What did that achieve?
They didn't have to. Why?
They were told to leave their homes by the leaflets that were dropped by your planes.
They send 300 missiles every day against civilian life in Israel. In the hot summer, invalids and elderly people were in shelters, and they bombed and bombed and bombed. What do you expect us to do?
And
look, you must be reasonable too. No, we didn't bomb.
You saw the pictures of Beirut, some of the suburbs in Beirut.
Since you know about television more than I do, may I say that we bombed the headquarters of Hezbollah in Beirut and nobody was killed. How did it happen?
You bombed Qana and plenty of people.
No, Qana is a different story. Again, please, you must separate different stories.
I wonder if we have anybody from Lebanon in the audience who would like to respond. You, sir, you raised your hand.
Over the summer, I was calling my family since the first day, every day, to find out that they're sitting at home not doing anything while planes bombard southern Lebanon. And now, I don't feel safe enough to go back.
The Lebanese are not our enemy. We don't have any claim about Lebanon. We don't want the Lebanese land. We don't want the Lebanese water. We don't want to mix in the Lebanese politics. We want to see a united, integrated Lebanon, a peaceful Lebanon. For years and years, our relations were superb, as you know. And then a foreign body came in. You have an army within an army, a state within a state, the Hezbollah. They are getting orders from the outside, not from the Lebanese. Today they are trying to bring down the legitimate government of Lebanon, of Mr. Senor.
They dispute that. They dispute that they're getting their orders from outside.
Are you surprised that they dispute? Surely.
So it's your word against their word.
No. What does Hezbollah want? They have to explain to somebody. Why are they shooting? Why are they firing? Why are they provoking? Let Lebanon live in peace.
Okay, let's take a question from the gentleman over there. You had your hand up, sir.
What about the airport? Who bombed the airport? Who bombed all the tunnels? Who bombed all the overpasses just to cut water and electricity from Beirut?
We closed the airport because weapons were smuggled to Hezbollah through the airport, and we asked to stop it. And today again, we asked the Syrians, not only us, the United Nations, to stop supplying missiles to the Hezbollah. There is a legitimate government in Lebanon that we respect. You know what happened in the last war? The United Nations demanded that Hezbollah will permit the Lebanese army to be deployed along the border with Israel. They refused. Only in the last war, they were forced to leave the border and hand it over to the legitimate army of Lebanon.
But what happened when the United Nations also asked Israel to withdraw? And
We did.
No, you didn't. You didn't. Right away when United Nations requested the withdrawal, you waited 3 days until you actually
waited
gave the...
3 days until the United Nations force will arrive and until the Lebanese army will be deployed. Clearly, we didn't want to leave as long as the Hezbollah remained. Once the Hezbollah left, the Lebanese army arrived, the United Nations arrived, we left.
Let's take a question, please, from Zuhaib Abdin, unless you've got something else you wanted to add.
Well, actually, I just wanted to point out one thing about withdrawing. I'm sorry, about the war itself. Most politicians and authorities in Israel mentioned that the war was a loss for Israel, and Israel lost the war. What do you say about that?
You know, every war is a loss. I prefer peace.
No, I'm talking about just Israel. We're not talking about,
Well, depends.
It's a loss
Depends how you judge it. For example, if the Hezbollah left the border, I don't think it's a loss. If fire stopped, I don't think it's a loss. And even if Nasrallah says that he didn't expect such a reaction, so he learned a lesson. And by the way, he gave some very nice compliments to Israel, which I appreciate. He says, look, a country, maybe they have gotten some mistakes, but they have the guts to correct it publicly. We don't say that Israel never committed a mistake. We do. We correct it. But let me say one thing to all of you. You must understand deeply and profoundly that Israel is in search of peace. We don't look for territories. We don't want to govern any other nation. We would like to see our neighbors enjoying life, enjoying peace, and we are convinced the better they will have it, the better neighbors we shall have. This is the basic assumption. As we gave back all the land, all the water, all the oil to Egypt, as we gave back all the land, all the water to Jordan, what does it show? You must understand it, otherwise you will live on rumors, on propaganda. And I'm speaking on behalf of my people, which I'm convinced want peace with you as you are, as you have to make peace with us as we are.
And you don't want to put the Palestinians on a diet, as Dov Weisglass suggested, the Prime Minister's advisor.
We don't suggest that ever they will become fat unduly, but a diet is not a policy. It's for the Palestinians to decide which way to go, what way to have. The only thing we demand is the end of belligerency, the end of missiles, the end of firing.
Let's take a question from the lady in the second row there, please.
10 years ago, if you remember, you paid a visit to Doha to attend the MENA conference. According to someone there, you said that peace will be forthcoming within 1 year in the Middle East. And that has obviously not occurred. So does your optimism cause you to ignore the reality of how difficult such a task is?
Are you ignoring the difficulties that lie in the way of peace?
No, I think we made a great deal of progress in the direction of peace. Look, more than half of the Palestinians, headed by Fatah, actually we're in full agreement with them. What happened is that there arrived another, unfortunately, fanatic group, the Hamas, and they are holding back. But I think
Hamas have moved. Hamas have moved, haven't they?
Moved.
Hamas have said the problem is not that Israel is a reality, it's the problem that there isn't a Palestinian state. Khaled Meshal said that.
No, sir, you must be precise.
2 weeks ago.
No, you must be precise in your quotation. If Hamas...
He said it was a matter of fact that there will remain a state called Israel. The problem is not that there is an entity called Israel. The problem is that the Palestinian state is non-existent. That was his interview with the Reuters news agency.
Well, I read it differently. I don't know who translated it. But I read that the fact is that Israel is in the territories. He didn't recognize, and they refused to recognize Israel as a state. Would they recognize? Would they respect the agreements? We would negotiate with them.
Let's take a question, please, from Mohammed Tatir. Mohammed Tatir.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Perez, my family's home used to be in the area that is now Ben Gurion Airport. The right of return is physically not possible for us. Israel has consistently rejected the right of return for Palestinians. Would you now agree, at a minimum, for international arbitration to decide compensation for Palestinians who lost their land?
Israel will be willingly participate in any attempt to compensate for any loss of home and land. We don't need any arbitration. We don't mind that this will be done by international body. Actually, we agreed. And I think there was a joint committee appointed, headed by Canada, to see for ways and means of compensation. And I represented Israel in that committee. We don't want anybody to suffer unduly, unnecessary. It's not our aim. You must understand, ladies and gentlemen, I don't look upon you as enemies. Please don't look upon me as an enemy. I look upon you as people that will grow to make peace, and I'm a grown-up man who tries to continue the process of peace. Don't get it wrong. And I don't want to engage too much in a debate because, when you begin to argue, you're a little bit exaggerating. But the basic will, the basic desire and destiny is to live in peace. Today democracy is not just the right of every person to be equal, but the equal right of every person to be different. Even if we are different people, we have to live in peace. Nothing will be achieved by war, but blood and suffering and waste of time and waste of youth. And that is my basic approach. So I didn't come here to win a debate. I really came here to let you know or understand that this is the basic desire of the Israelis. And we have shown it whenever we could.
Do you want to come back on that?
Thank you very much for your answer, but as you may know, many peace talks or negotiations collapsed because there was no agreement on the right to return. And we're not getting anywhere forward if there's no agreement on this right for Palestinians. How do you comment on that?
We handed over Gaza completely, and we're ready to hand over most, if not all, of the West Bank. So what does it show? And we're ready to sit and listen and look for creative solutions. The problem is that Fatah agrees, so we can sit with them, and Hamas does not agree to negotiate. That's the only problem.
Lady in the front row.
You mentioned that Israel should defend themselves. So are Palestinians. They should defend themselves either. And it seems the only way to do so for Palestinians to defend themselves is youth going up there and blow up themselves. You consider them suicide bombers and terrorists. We consider them brave. And the violence still going up and up. And so who are you blaming then? Palestinians, Israelis, both?
I don't blame anybody. I blame people that make out of themselves a bomb. And you say we, I don't know who are the we. I read a declaration by a very distinguished sheikh here in Qatar that turns to the Arabs and says, stop it. It's against the Quran. You don't have the right to commit suicide, kill yourself, and kill other people. And I agree with him fully.
What about the Israeli attacks? Do you think that more victims coming of suicide bombers more than the Israeli attacks? I don't think so.
No, we say there is no need of violence. You know, peace was achieved without violence. I think it's better to sit around the table and negotiate and
We said for many times and many years, Camp David, for instance, wrote...
We sit and we achieved. We achieved peace with Egypt, the largest Arab country. We achieved peace with Jordan, and we made progress with the Palestinians. Israel is the first country to recognize a Palestinian personality, to recognize the right of the Palestinians of their land. And we are ready to continue to negotiate. The bombs are holding the negotiations, not furthering it. And believe me, better go the way of Gandhi, better go the way of Nelson Mandela, you and us. And I'm telling you time and again that by peaceful negotiations you will achieve quicker and better whatever you have in mind. And I don't suggest to use killing instead of arguments and dialogue. It's a mistake. And I don't say all the Palestinians are wrong, all the Israelis are right. No. I say that whoever uses force is mistaken, because the greatest force in life is goodwill. And the greatest hope in life is peace. Don't kill, don't be killed. It's not necessary.
Thanks.
Gentleman in the fourth row. You, sir. Yeah.
Mr. Perez, you claim that Israel was the first country to recognize the Palestinians' right to their land. Now, putting the past aside and concentrating only on the West Bank and Gaza, what kind of recognition is this that comes with constant incursions, the expansion of settlements, the maintaining of settlements on land stolen from Palestinians, and also, if we extend this further, what kind of respect is this for other people's sovereignty on their land when Israel continues to occupy the Golan Heights, which were taken from Syria, and the Sheba farms, which I agree are contested by both countries, but they are not Israeli land?
What do you mean we occupy the Golan Heights? Syria attacked us for no reason, without provocation. In the holiest days of our life, Syria, together with Egypt, they had a surprise attack against Israel. Israel went to fight. We won the Golan Heights in the war, and we won the Sinai Peninsula, which is by far larger, 40 times the size of the Golan Heights.
But what about Palestinian land, Mr. Perez? My question was also directed at Palestinian land. My question was also directed at the West Bank and the amount of settlements constructed, especially around East Jerusalem. You claim you recognize the right of Palestinians to this land, yet you maintain and expand these settlements.
Well, Palestinian land in Gaza we gave back completely. We withdrew and we dismantled our settlements.
While expanding settlements in the
West Bank, we say we are ready to sit down, and in an opening position, we suggested practically an inch for an inch. Part of it by withdrawing, and part of it by trading land for land. Jerusalem is not necessarily a Palestinian land. Jerusalem, in our judgment, is Israeli land. So we have a controversy there.
But President Bush told you in April 2002, he said the occupation must end. He said the occupation must end through withdrawal to secure and recognize boundaries consistent with UN resolutions 242 and 338. You've ignored that demand.
No, I agree to it. But
for the last 4 or 5 years.
I'm sorry.
Since he made it.
What does 242 and 338 say? That we have to retreat to secure borders, to agreed and secure borders.
Also talks about the inadmissibility of holding land acquired through invasion.
No, we are ready to sit down. We need also security in any land. You can't say give back the land and you won't have security. Doesn't make sense. Look, there are two sides to the story. And Israel said we are ready to give back land for security. And we gave back land. And we didn't get completely the security. But now what do you want us to do? To give back land and say now attack us again? Don't we have the right to insist to have security?
We have another question which relates
Yes,
to
please.
that, which is about the separation barrier. From Thomas Canswick, please. Thomas Canswick.
Many in the Arab world see the building of a wall by Israel as a major obstacle in the peace process. What can you say to dispel these beliefs?
I think the wall is temporary. And was done because we were forced to do it. There were an ongoing stream of attacks by suicidal bombers against Israel. Since we built the wall, it was cut by 80%. I mean, it obviously was a defensive act.
Why do you need to build it on Palestinian land? Why did you not build it on your own territory if you needed the wall?
We didn't build it on Palestinian land. Most of the wall is on the border. You must be aware of it.
85% of its route extends into the West Bank, according to Human Rights Watch.
No, sir.
85%. They're wrong.
No, sir.
They're all wrong.
No, it's only 8% of the West Bank which is within the wall, and this is because of the defensive line. But we would never have in mind to build a wall. What for? You know, between us and the Jordanians, there is no walls, no minefields, no fences, nothing whatsoever. And what is the difference?
Why not build it within your own territory?
We build it on the border, and we build it...
You build it beyond the border.
No, we build it at the places from where the suicidal bombers came. We didn't build it to conquer land, we built it to defend our lives. We have 400 kilometers of border with the Jordanians. Not a single stone, not a single fence, not a single wall. Why don't you look it? What is the difference?
Gentleman in the first row there.
Good evening, Mr. Perez. Every Jew in the world has a right to an Israeli citizenship, even if he or she doesn't have a clue where Israel is or haven't seen Israel. Yet a Palestinian who has been born, raised, and his whole family for centuries has been there is excluded from the same right, based on religion. Does this mean that Israel, a country, is built on exclusivity of Jewish supremacy and a type of racism?
If you go back on history, why go back just on centuries? Why wouldn't you go back to millenniums? Where does past begin? At the convenience of your point of view? Or at the early days? The early days, as you know, there were not Arabs in Israel. So, I mean, if you go to the past, it's endless. Go to the future. Now, let me tell you about being Jewish and being Arabs. I know, to be honest, that many Arabs would like to wake up in the morning and see instead of the Israelis sweets, for example. I know that many Israelis would like to wake up one morning and see instead of the Arabs Dutch, for example. It won't happen. You can't change neither your parents nor your neighbors. We have to negotiate with you as you are, in full respect. You have to negotiate with us as we are, with all the difficulties. We are not going to change neither our content or personality. And I believe it's possible. All of us are human beings.
But we're talking about a Israeli citizenship.
And if you want to go to the past, why wouldn't you begin with Abraham? By the way, the Palestinians and the Muslims are saying that all of us are children of Abraham. Was Abraham an Arab? Abraham was Jewish. So what? If we are the children of Abraham, so should be brothers.
What we're talking about, Mr. Perez, is the Israeli citizenship as well.
It won't help the citizenship. You have Iraqi citizenship. Does this prevent a fight between the Sunnites and the Shiites? Look, you must follow ethnicity. There are 24 Arab countries. What is an Arab country? A country where the Arabs are a majority. If you try to change the majority, you may do it, but then you'll have a conflict. There is a single state where I have a Jewish majority. You can't take it away from us, because then we shall not be a Jewish state, and the conflict will go on. The passport will not overpass the conflict, as we see in Algeria, as we see in Iraq, as we see in Sudan. It's not an answer. And you know what we have? We are 7 million people today in Israel. 1.4 are Arabs. They are full citizens. They have equal right. And if there is the slightest discrimination, we are trying to overcome. Among them, we have today already 50,000 academicians. Every year, 19,000 young Arabs, boys and girls, are registering in the universities. You know, out of the 50,000 academicians, many of them are doctors. They work in the Israeli hospitals. And you'll come into a hospital, you wouldn't distinguish between an Arab and a Jewish doctor, or between an Arab and a Jewish nurse. If we can handle our health and life together, why should we fight?
Could we have one from Dana Sheikh Mahmoud, please? Dana Sheikh Mahmoud.
You said, I quote, "The president of Iran should remember that Iran can also be wiped off the map. Would Israel launch a strike against Iran's nuclear facilities like it did against Iraq in the 80s?
We never said it. Look, we don't have any problems with Iran. Historically, we have had excellent relations with Iran, under Cyrus, for example, as a king, under the last king. The problem is not Iran, the problem is Ahmadinejad. It's a problem for Israel. It's a problem for the principalities here. It's a problem for the Iranian people, because it does not carry neither a promise nor a solution.
You told a meeting at the Economic Forum in Davos that there were two alternatives: military action or regime change.
Yes.
You believe that?
I believe that the
And is Israel prepared to carry out either option?
No, Israel will not intervene. Israel never threatened any country, not by any weapons, including nuclear weapons. Israel was threatened, but Israel didn't threaten anybody else. And we don't intend to change our policy. We are not declaring any enemies. We don't suggest to wipe out anybody. If we shall be attacked, we shall defend ourselves. We belong to the same globe, the same world. What happened in the past remains, but as an irrelevant division, as an irrelevant prejudice. And you are young people who work for the future.
We have a question, please, from Doha Ben Hida. Doha Ben Hida.
My question is about Iraq. Has the decline of Iraq become an advantage for Israel?
No. We don't have anything, and we don't want to play any role in Iraq. And from my standpoint, I would prefer to see a united Iraq than a divided Iraq that will unsettle the stability of the Middle East. But we are not masters of anybody. The only thing which is in reference to our neighbor is to achieve peace and stop war. We don't have the slightest intention to intervene in the way of life, in the policies of another land. It's not our business. We were not born to master our people. We left the house of slaves, not in order to become a house of masters.
Could we have a question, please, from Mariam Gabriel? Mariam Gabriel.
Mr. Perez, if you could change one thing that the Arab world perceives about Israel, what would it be?
To look to the future. Look, I suggest to you, leave history. It's a waste of time. History is full of mistakes. Some people say you have to study history in order not to repeat the previous mistakes. Okay, so you'll make other mistakes. Doesn't matter. If you want to remember something, put it on the internet. The internet will remember instead of you. Use your faculties, your talents, your imagination to build a new future, not to repeat an old past. And then you and us and everybody can be happily living together in peace. I'm telling it to our young people, I'm telling it to you. Look to the future. The future is not necessarily a repetition or a continuation of the past. The future is totally divorced from the past, as science is divorced from land. We live in a different globe. And I'm telling you, you and our youngsters, you have a lot of talent, a lot of potential. Put it in a positive use, you and our boys and girls as well. And you will discover that you don't have to repeat the ill doing of the past, but you can build a future of harmony and understanding and tolerance.
All right, I'm afraid we've run out of time here. Mr. Perez, thank you very much indeed for coming here, for making the journey here. My thanks to you, also the audience, for coming here. The Doha debates will be back again next month. Do join us then. For now, from all of us on the team, thank you very much for being here. Good night. Thank you.